I have two questions. One to you, Ashok, from an insurance perspective, and then the other to the two providers in the room. So the first question is, to what extent do insurance companies involve the providers when designing their products? Because I think that part of the problem here is that the providers do not quite understand what this insurance company is. So in terms of the benefits, the limits, the exclusions, how we've priced it, yeah, the targeted providers. So this is a product that is targeted towards these upper level providers, middle level. So you co-design a product. If we co-design a product, then we both take responsibility for it. And once we both take responsibility for it, it makes us want to make it work. So I think that is something that in my years, I have been in the healthcare provision space for the last 20 years, running healthcare groups for the last 12. I think that's something that is really key and is missing in the industry. And if we're able to get this right, then it's something that could change things quite a bit for everyone involved, all the parties. Again, to the providers in the house, there are different models of payment, and what we're used to is, so to speak, charging on a volume-based basis. So you charge your lab test based on the number of lab tests you've done, based on the number of days in hospital, based on the number of drugs you gave. So if we could get the health economists here to help us design value-based payment systems. So you're being paid on the basis of the value you're providing to the patient rather than the number of tests or days or drugs that you're giving to the patient. To what extent will we be willing to accept this? Thank you.
You know, I've been listening and I was trying to figure what should I say. And I decided to try and say things that are not said in extreme anger, but are basically analytical. So the first issue, you know, keeping away from the very annoying things that happen. I've witnessed people dying in the top hospitals that I would not name, were very close to me, out of sheer negligence, receiving bills where my son looked at the bill and he says those were 100 Panadols in a top hospital, one of the top hospitals in this country. So the first issue is just remember that. And since it's not going to be helpful if I tell you that. So all those things exist and I'm not telling you that. So I'm sorry, gentlemen and ladies, whatever you're saying, not because of you, I know it's not about you, it's just does not reflect the reality of Kenya. That's what you've got to understand, and it's not your personal fault, but that's just the reality. Now, keeping away from that, you know, when you've gone through things personally, then you tend to become, you can't see the forest for the trees. So then you attempt to see the forest rather than get into that side of it. But you've got to understand that about people and why they might be impatient with even the logic you're giving. So I have a more general view about Kenyan society. I lived away for a very long time, as you might have probably figured. Just the way I've started, I'm not very Kenyan. So the first challenge in Kenya, while honest thing won't work, is I came back to Kenya. I used to ask very direct questions. Then I realized we have a culture of telling lies to each other. So people never have honest, frank conversations. Kunapakana mafuta. You see? So even here, I don't feel I can have a blunt, direct conversation. That's why I've not named that hospital. You see, so I've also now become acculturated to that way of thinking. So when he says, let's set up a portal, I actually thought about it for consumer business. You know what someone told me? But I'm bigger risasi. If you're going to cross paths with, so back to where I'm getting at, Kwame, I used to be an economist, and I abandoned that and went and studied finance and became a finance guy. Now, there's a school of economics called institutional economists, where they go socio-economic. So this technocracy stuff, we're talking technocracy. And I'm a trained technocracy person, I'm a quantitative investment guy, so I've done the maths, computers, what, but it has nothing to do with that. Countries proceed where you have a level of societal trust. So it's not like I'm saying, unless the society is committed to solving the problem, we can talk about it in a technocratic way. But there's only so much we can do unless the society actually says we want to solve these problems. Thank you. Sorry for taking so much time.
You're not going to take as long as... And Ashok, you got the questions. And Dr. Okay.
Thank you very much and, for everyone who's spoken before me. I just have to add to this. My name is Dr. Kianjui. And for the last 5 years, I've been trying to see what can be done. Because healthcare has done me badly. Since I lost my father, I've lost many people. Like he said, because of, I will not call it negligence, I call it medical errors. And there are many reasons why medical errors are there. And I've tried, I've moved on, I wanted to become a pediatrician, I wanted to become this, I've done health management, and thought maybe I should influence policy. Because that way, it will change things. But I've found that it's not easy. But in the last 5 years, I've come to this realization. The issue is not the people, perfect people, hard-working people. The issue is the business model. That's my realization. The business model that we have, we're making money, and the economists here, many of them, sir, have from you, is the business model dictates how business will run, because how people are making money dictates how they do it. Healthcare, doctors will be here. Our business model is that we make money when people are sick. So using this business model, we're making money when people are sick, whether it's revenue, whether it's surplus, whether it's profits. Is it in our interest? Does the business model lead to itself for us keeping people healthy? No. I was impressed when my colleague here mentioned about, can we have a very value-based business model? I want to say this, if we don't adopt a value-based business model, we're going nowhere. And finally, I want to say that the regulators have let us down. And it's not one regulator, not IRA, especially the health sector. What have they done? Instead of the regulators become regulators, they've sat on one side and become service providers. Look at all our regulators in healthcare. They belong where? They belong under Ministry of Health. 52% or more of the providers are under Ministry of Health. Can they be able to justify, objectively, measure outcomes in those public sectors where they also belong? The answer is no. The private sector have to pay for their annual licenses. The public sector, they don't pay. They will come to your lab to check whether you are following standards. They won't go to the private sector, to the public sector. So with the regulator, when a referee in a league is also sponsoring half of the teams in the leagues, do you expect fair play? Yeah. Thank you.
Steve, why didn't you ask me also for the protocol? So that you hold me accountable to what I do. That's the way the rest of the world has gone, or rather the developed health systems. It's something that will be nice if we can transition to. It makes life even easier for us as healthcare providers. The second thing, co-designing. Again, another thing I have asked, can we co-design? Again, one of my colleagues from insurance, where I said, don't ask me to reduce the cost. Why can't we look at what really comes into this? And then I'll tell you if this is what I have, this is why I do what I do. And one of our insurance providers has actually taken this and is looking at it, and we're trying to see what we can work out together with them. I think more trust between us will make a difference, and when we talk more, we are willing. And it's a risk we each have to take, whether we like it or not. I give to Mr. Nkwari.
I think I'll be very brief, and I'll address the first question that Dennis asked. Can we price this as a product? Yes, we can. I have done the costings of how you can cost various conditions, diagnosis, and I'll give you, for example, I do believe without complications. Yeah, you can manage a hypertensive patient who doesn't have complications, stable, good diet, requiring regular medication at less than $500 of 50,000 Kenya shillings per year. Okay? My colleagues in the insurance industry will tell you they pay more than that per month, right? I do believe, yes, we need to move away from a shop telling me, give me itemized billing for lab, whatever. And I'm happy to do that because I don't agree with him. And that one I strongly disagree. And as I said, you need to tire people and know there are ethical, genuine people in the industry who do right. Yeah? And we give you an itemized bill, and we give you a person when we are discharging you. Please go through your bill. And if there's anything, we pass a credit note or we give you a cash back and we do not argue. Yeah. But as I said, I rather to that. Also, as consumers, let's accept our responsibility about our choice. Yeah? Because honestly, if you choose to go to a place that either you are not aware of what goes on, or you clearly know that it is expensive. Because look at it. I am an accountant by profession. I need to make that disclaimer. The guys who are calling me a doctor, if you fall here, I'll be running away together with the rest. But I've been in the healthcare space for long. I have accepted the title doctor. So, for me is my price. I know it. Yeah. And there's a similar accountants who will be priced 50% of my price. Yeah. And when you call me to interview me as a CFO, I will not accept that price because and those dynamics will always be there. It's guys, let's accept it. It's an open market. Secondly, for me is and this is what I would encourage our colleagues in the healthcare industry, because whether you're an underwriter, whether you're a provider, we are in the healthcare industry. Okay, let's collaborate. We belong even to the same lobby groups, Kenya Healthcare Federation. But when you get there, we need to sit on the table and address what are the issues and fix them.
Okay, Mr. Shaw, and then.
Right. I think there's something that Kenyans are very, Kenyans are basically people who accept things as they happen. They will not go out and talk about it. I've come across so many cases, and people ring me up because what happens is that they think that because of an insurance connection and I know a lot more about hospitals, they would call me and say, we've got a problem with this particular hospital, that there's negligence and so on, what do we do? So I tell them that, look, the only thing you can do is that perhaps take it up with the hospital and with the lawyer. But, when one of us has gone into a hospital and there has been negligence and the person has died, we accept it. We will not take it up further. It's very rarely that we do. So that's something about Kenyans. We accept fate, and it's something that happens. But John, Apollo, back in 2000, we were the only company that started insuring HIV, and we did that for 7 years. We were the only ones. After that, others came in. But we said we took a bold step and we said this is something that we need to do.
After I went to court.
No, you never went to court because you never went to court. I was the we basically said that under our medical cover we will provide, we provided HIV cover right from day one. And in our own staff, we still have people who were HIV then, and like you, they're as healthy as me and you. so basically that's something that we believe that there are certain things that we must do as insurers, but Dennis, you're talking about we don't really talk to a provider and tell them that this when we craft our covers, they are more based on what we have been doing it for a long time, and we keep on changing them from time to time. But I don't think we actually come to you and say, well, we do. We do for certain things. We come to you and say, can we have a package? Can we have certain packages? And then when we agree on those packages, we'll put it into our system and agree on that. But when it comes to our overall policy, we don't consult, and perhaps we should sit down with you and say what can be done. So that what will happen is that it will meet with the needs, and obviously you know more about the types of illnesses that take place, people are succumbing to, and we can then see whether we can cover those and agree the methodology of cover. The only thing, the other is value-based care. That's where value-based care will come in the sense that we would be able to go to a client. But in our case, Irene, what we do is we have got several types of covers. We have covers which, standard covers which will take care of everybody. We have corporate covers which are designed to what the corporate wants. But we also have a very minor cover for people at the bottom of the pyramid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Moses, as you comment on what they've said, I'm hearing what people do right, but what we have established is that it's not where it should be, service to the consumer. Can we start pointing out, if we were to start addressing the disconnect, where could we start? What are the low-hanging fruits that could start making this a better relationship than it is right now? And Kwame, I'll ask you the same thing. And who else has a question? Harold? Oh gosh, okay.
Thanks.
So let's all of us try and keep it brief.
So let me first start by throwing my 2 cents on the provider payment mechanisms, because I think this is really fundamental. We are very much on a fee-for-service model in this market that completely misaligns the interest continuously. So I think going to either value-based care or other models and the data and technologies there to enable that would help. Now, if I look at things from a consumer lens, we are seated here talking about choices. But in healthcare, there is the highest information asymmetry for the patient. When the patient is walking in there, they only have a rough idea that I have a cover, let's say I have a cover from APA of 100,000 outpatient, but I don't know the exclusions, the sublimits, everything. I'm just being surprised at the point of service. I don't know the prices. And so when we are talking about, yes, I walked into this hospital because I believe it gives me the possible, the best possible outcomes. And the first thing we need to do, and I think we talked about it, is really that member education. And today, the insurers and the hospitals, they do have the cost, they do have the crisis. I think you suggested an idea, but if you take at it from an aggregated level, if you look at what happened in the hospitality industry, and even today you will know what is the cost of the hotel that you want to go to, and you will go in and you will check and so on. Same thing with the airline industry. People share information, even if it's some of the operational, it ends up improving the customer experience. So if we are to empower the users, we must be able to take those bold steps. There is no reason why today we are not able to actually, for example, if I throw in this challenge to the underwriters and the hospitals, there's no reason why you're not able to share some of the information around outcomes, if also around enabling, maybe not specific prices, but the range, so that if I am as an empowered consumer, I know if I only have 20,000, then there are some hospitals, if I go to, it will cost 50% of that benefit, and then probably I should go to another one. I think that is, and that has to start. I also do think from a regulatory perspective, I think the regulators on both, particularly from a healthcare industry, also from the insurance industry, I do think that it's time to actually bear more teeth because as I've had the red flags and things, and yet we all know, I think according to some industry reports, we talk about reports that have even come out of the industry, 35% fraud, same reports that come through from the underwriting side, the health side. So, and these kinds of things about consumer protection. So I do think it's also a challenge to the regulators to be more proactive, more aggressive. You will not hear some of these things happening in the banking sector for long. So that would be my 2 cents. And the last thing, fundamentally, we have to empower the users. So we have to be able to engage with them where they are. And that's something the banking industry has done in the financial services. And you see users are much more empowered.
All right, Kwame.
So 2 things. I mean, Moses is right about this is a sector in which the greatest asymmetry between the professional and whoever is receiving the care, but also with the agents. So I work in an office where we've had 20 years of, 20 I think, years of health insurance, but we don't know how much our agent gets as a commission for the money we pay. And they say that will not be disclosed, which I find very, very interesting, because then we don't know when they give us our usage rates, whether they're including the agent's part as part of the fees and everything else. So basically, the transparency that Mr. Kuria talks about here is also fundamental. And that's not something that, honestly, we should have to debate. It's okay, we know everybody needs to make a living, they're adding value, but you hear that in the industry, in some places it comes from 15% to as high as 30%. Then you need to ask yourselves, if you're only coming to us in June, because that's when we pay, why should our cost be loaded with 30% when we actually never see you at all? So those are some of the things, because that's a part of adding the value. All those cost measures need to make a difference. I mean, need to be material. And the second one that I also think is here again is, look, every hospital collects data. The health management systems that they have are very sophisticated. I think, as you said, disclosures about outcomes. And it's something that perhaps they will not do voluntarily, so it's something that the hospitals, the insurers and the regulator will push by saying, look, compared to the rest of your payments, how many of the people who were actually treated here last year had a tooth extraction as opposed to a cover, as opposed to a root canal, for those who are paying and those who are using the insurance product, because that will help you to understand where the incentives actually lie. That kind of information is not available, and the exploitation of asymmetry in an unfair way that actually loads the product with more makes the product more expensive than it is important. So yes, it's time for this sector to begin to work for its customers.
Okay, so we have to the...
Is it ethical for insurance companies to reduce the limit of a patient the following year after they've been diagnosed with a serious illness?
Okay.
It's pretty straightforward.
Yes, it is. One more here. Okay.
Why be so discriminating in empaneling more providers? Because sometimes you want to offer a service as a provider, but the insurance tells you, no, we have other providers. And even when you check the cost of those other providers, they're probably even more expensive than you. So they make it inconvenient for the patient, they make it more expensive for the patient because they also limit the people that they are also putting on the cover. And then in terms of doing business with insurances, as doctors we suffer because, and even the facilities, we have late payments from the insurances, yet the clients have already paid their premiums and you as a provider has already offered the service. And then sometimes, they negotiate. I think what he was suggesting is important about everyone being involved in costing the care, because insurances want a certain price, but don't take into consideration the cost of doing business with the provider. There's licenses, business permits, the medical boards, litigation, and indemnity.
You got that?
I want to just point out a blind spot, I think, here, which is mental health. I think COVID did that quite well for us, but I think we can all agree that's where providers, insurers, and consumers are all failing, globally, but in this country as well. And I want to know from anyone on the panel, but provider insurers, what are you going to do about this in the next 5 years?
Good evening, my name is Caroline Juguna and I'm an insurance agent. So to clarify, insurance commission is regulated. So whether I take you to APA or Jubilee or UAP, the commission is regulated and it's 10% for medical. So my question is to the insurance company and to the hospital, where as a client and as a patient, we are a common consumer for both of you. Where do you protect us as a client, or how can you come up with a mechanism to communicate to each other without affecting the client, who is a common consumer for both of you? In terms of if a client walks into a hospital and you're told, no, we are not taking resolution, at what point was that communication done? Can there be a timeline or a credit line between the hospital and the insurance? And also a timeline like 3 months already the communication is out to clients and to everybody to avoid that disappointment for the clients.
Why is it that when one is paying cash, it's cheaper when paying cash than when using an insurance card?
Good evening, my name is Dr. Elijah Matolo. I work in the insurance sector. I want to tell you, if you ever found yourself in a place where you're feeling bad about your insurance company or about a healthcare provider, it is not your fault. There are people charged with that. They're called regulators, and they are not doing everything they're supposed to do. If they're not doing everything they're supposed to do, there are people who they are accountable to someone. That someone is the one failing us, and it's not healthcare or alone. It's not insurance only. It's across all sectors: telecommunications, transport. There's a huge societal issue where we've accepted, we have a learned helplessness. So when you talk about value-based, this is another point. The problem I face when I see our claims is that there's so much low-value care, and very the high-level care or the high-value care is not as required. Every person comes there, it's a matter of how much you can afford to pay. Yeah, it's not a question of how much care do you actually need. So we tell you, no, 500,000 in ICU, that's your limit, that's it. But the same 500,000 can be used for multiple visits, going for health checkups, costing you 70,000 for things that are not necessary. And for as long as we continue misusing the little resources that we have, we will never reach that point where everyone gets what they need. And healthcare is a need, it's not a want. There are the extras out there, but if we don't address that, then we will still continue, throwing the blame game between insurers, providers, and patients. And patients are not, they're not consumers. Yeah, when you go to buy a phone, everything is okay with you. When you're going to a hospital, you're sick, for heaven's sake, someone needs to be watching out for our patients and make sure that they do get, so that no one takes advantage, be it the insurer, be it the provider, or anyone else along that chain. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. And those are the last questions. I'll pick up the mental health rule. You're right, COVID made it clear that mental health is greatly underserved in this country, despite the fact that it's part of our priorities in universal healthcare. What are we going to do about it? One, a lot of public health information. Just from a cultural perspective, even when you tell someone to go and see a counselor, they ask you, do you think I'm mad? They will tell you, by faith, I will overcome this. So a lot of public health education, which we partner even with our peers,
partner with institutions. For us as an institution, just looking at ensuring that counseling services, whenever they are required by a patient, that initially we do not charge you for it, so that you have the first connection. And I'll tell you, 50% of the patients say they don't want to see a counselor or a psychologist. A patient has a right to choose who to see. And so as a society, our role is first a lot of mental health awareness before it can even be accepted for people to truly pay. And then the reality that we have very few centers that offer good mental health. We all just think of one place called Madare, or we think of a rehab place. We've not seen mental health as a flu or a malaria, or I'm going through post-grieving depression. It will pass. It happens. So those are the things I think we can be able to do. Thank you.
I think somebody raised the issue about consumer protection, and I think that one I will not overemphasize it, because I think it's Kwame has talked about it for the longest time in the evening. You know, there's as much as we can do to protect you as a consumer from exploitation, and from where I sit, and let me give an example. That relates to insurance, but not the one who was blamed, but you have to pay the excess, and yeah, if we get it from the other party, we'll refund you back. So, and the car was repaired, and I went away, and I forgot about it, and I had another accident, the same case happened, and I had to pay a protector. 1 year down the line, APA called me to come and pick my excess refund check. That tells me that is an ethical organization that is taking its own initiatives to protect its consumer. And there are people in healthcare industry who are doing that, yeah, who are providing, and I agree 100%, the information asymmetry is just too huge. But they are, you know, there are those who are making everything possible to make the provision of service as transparent as possible. Are we where we should be? Not yet. The other question that was asked was about why cash is cheaper than insurance. You know, you have to look at it this way, and you know, for me, this is not even a regulation issue, because the regulator says insurance is a cash and carry business, yeah, and the people who have tried to do it the other way have left us as providers, as consumers, suffering. This, you know, this is the second time as a provider I am losing money after resolution collapsed. Okay. Somebody mentioned the Explico, yeah. Okay. And so you, I mean, I provide services to you, okay? My drugs suppliers require their payment now. My doctor will not understand that a shock has not paid me within 60 days, you know? And it's always of incentivizing. And I was telling you, it's not only cash consumers actually who are more get affordable pricing. Yeah? There are insurance companies that we work with, and when they pay us on like early payments within 3 days or so after, you know, we give it we give a cashback. Yeah. So, but of course, you don't expect that you pay me after 90, 120 days, and I do not underwrite my risk. And I said, we just need to be clearly also honest, yeah, and be open. And it's just like even the question of UHC, just to digress a minute. Guys, let's go back and look at it. We are trying to deliver an affordable healthcare model, yet, yeah, what percentage of our drugs do we import? Show me one single manufacturer of RAB reagents in this country. One. Yeah? Show me one manufacturer of radiology consumables. We have not even gone to an equipment.
What is the cost of an MRI machine? I will tell you. She has invested in an MRI machine. I wouldn't invest in it. It won't give me a return in my own lifetime, mine. Yeah. And I'm not even half a century years old. Okay, so I mean, we need to look at those issues. Their solutions, I do believe, we need to look about that. The last question was about communication of suspension of services. And you know, as I said, standard business practice. I will not come to Kwame having been insured by a shock and tell Kwame I'm going to suspend APA tomorrow, right? I do believe that the ethical thing to do, the best business practice, is communicate to a shock and tell him, a shock, there is a problem, and in 30 days, yeah? Because I believe you, we don't wake up and suspend services. We also have contracts with them on your side, and we'll communicate and tell them, within this period, we'll stop issuing services. Now, if he does not take any action after I have informed him and reminded him, come Friday, as Odudo was saying that accountants like suspending accounts on Friday, we'll just suspend the account, and the person who is in the ward when they are discharged on Saturday, you will pay cash. But we communicated. So it is upon, it's incumbent also upon the underwriter, where possible, to communicate to their patients if they have decided that they do not want to work with a certain provider. And we are okay with that, yeah?
Ashok.
Thank you. The first question you had was reduce the limit after they have been diagnosed. There are certain conditions in the policies that we have. Now, the main issue is when it comes to chronic. And that's the most, the biggest area of concern that we have. So what happens is that if somebody has been, in fact it happened to a friend of mine recently, he was insured with APA, and he's still insured with APA. And what happened was, he was diagnosed with a tumor. So when he went to the team, they said that the cover is up to, your cover is limited to 500,000 shillings. Because tumor is cancer, and to us it's a chronic condition. So we basically told the person that we can only cover you for 500,000 shillings. So I went to the team and I asked her, I said, can you explain to me this thing? And they said, well, this is a standard condition that we have. But what happens is that there is another policy we have. What would happen is that for the time you're diagnosed, we'll pay you, for that year we'll pay you the full cost. But the next year it will be reduced to a chronic condition, and we will limit that payment for any more incidences for that condition. So that is one area. Now, late payment to providers, I think, is something that we are quite clear about it. If we would not, I think with somebody like Rukwara at Meridian, we have arrangements and we would negotiate rates. We'll negotiate rates with him, and in that negotiations we'd also say within what time we'll pay the bills that have been incurred. Cash versus, cash being charged by hospitals at a lower rate and insurance at a higher rate is a concern that we have raised many a times with the providers. We think it's wrong. Because, if somebody is paying cash, they get a cheaper rate, and then somebody is under insurance, they have to pay higher, which we believe is not a good practice. So what we have done is all the providers that charge us more and charge the cash-paying patient less, we impose a co-payment. So suppose you go to a hospital which is charging people at a lesser rate for cash, and they charge us more, then we just say to the person, you pay the difference. So with this a co-payment. So a lot of these hospitals, we would say that we will charge, you'll have to pay 2,000 shillings from your own pocket, and we'll take the balance. That's how we handle it. But that's not the right way. It should be that a hospital also should charge perhaps the same rate for everyone. And so if they charge the same rate, then for us it's a good thing. Mental health. The reason mental health is a difficult cover that we can provide is that it can, it's like chronic. It can continue, and it's very difficult to know how to go. And the number of visits are quite a few. But because of COVID, what we did was for certain people, we actually said we'll provide counseling services. We'll provide counseling services because what happened was with COVID, what was happening was people were working from home. Then loneliness and other things started coming in. So we said that we will make counseling services available to them. But that is only for the period of COVID, but not generally.
Thank you. Moses and Kwame, as we wrap up, you've heard what the questions were. I'm now looking for, perhaps from the two of you, 5 recommendations that would improve on the relationship that we've had. Clearly, there's work to be done. So as you answer the questions, I'm looking for from the two of you, 5 recommendations that we will take out of here and say, these are low-hanging fruits that we could start to address from now, and let's see that the next time we come here, we'll have some good news to report. Thanks.
Thanks, Irene. I think I'll just do 2, then leave 3 to Kwame. So I think, it's interesting to hear this conversation around some of the underlying drivers on the mistrust. Especially, let me talk about the long payment cycles that we've talked about, and which then result to the differences between cash and prices for insurance, which then means that if insurance costs are up, then there will be more claims costs. Then what will happen is then you have a loading come in the subsequent year, and the cycle continues. I do think with automation and digitization, there is no reason why data is not flowing real time. Banks do clearing within 24 hours in this country, and that happens. So there is no reason why we shouldn't have the data flowing from hospitals and the adjudication, and then all the payment terms that have been agreed between the hospitals and the underwriters are all set up and automated with business rules, and that then means that the risk, the payment risk that the hospitals take, they don't have to take that, and therefore they don't have to factor that in the cost and so on. And that would go a long way in creating the trust. The second thing is, I believe we must fundamentally grow the coverage of insurance, whether it's working with on the private side or even on the public side. Let me put it this way. One of the fundamental reasons why the health, particularly private health insurance, we're talking about the investments that Dr. Ruparo here said that not invest in an MRI machine because it's costly. But you're looking at 3 million people who on the private insurance side were covered. The majority pay out of pocket, and that creates a big challenge. So we have to grow that risk pool, because then it means the investments on the hospital side can be done because there is a certainty on a constant stream of income that will come through. But fundamentally, it will save the financial shocks that lead to many families and many people straining. If I ask here how many people have been asked to contribute to a Harambe or one of those, very many hands might go up. So we must as industry players, we must think of how we will get people from post-payment, from out-of-pocket post-payments to prepayments through insurance mechanisms. And I think all that will help in driving the issues of cost. And to save Kwame, let me throw one more. We must be proactive about empowering the consumers. In this digital age, we've seen price discovery and empowering, giving people all the information they need to make decisions, transforming industries and creating trust and leading to the retention of customers and so on. So that is something that both as hospitals and as underwriters and as players in this industry, we need to do and we must do.
Correct. So I'm glad I learned something that actually the rates are regulated. That's what we thought as well. But we asked our agent to say that she's not allowed to disclose that for us, with us. So maybe that's just a question of destroying trust once again. But the second point, the point that I'll add to you is Kenya's health system is more or less like one. So the kind of burdens that the private sector insurance firms will bear if the NHIF continues and public health infrastructure continues to fail will just get worse and worse. I mean, it'll get worse over time. So I think one of the things we have to conclude is, look, in as much as we also apply pressure because we pay, we must also ask the NHIF and the public health system to do better. So that's it has to improve, to be honest. It must have standards. That's one. Two, I'm opposed to the idea, of course, members of parliament have tried to fix it, where health insurance firms actually force you to have to use the NHIF fast cards, especially for outpatient, for inpatient stuff, then take up the reverse. I think that's kind of being very clever, to be honest, especially because most of them are the ones who benefit the most, because Kenyans go out there to private hospitals and then most of that income goes back there. So our fairness around how private firms and private hospitals will not push their costs all the way to the NHIF and then remain with the cream where they actually take bigger margins is one that's a useful one. But the final point is part of the security and the stability that we wish, to the extent that is possible, will come from what the regulators do. And it's bad to kick somebody when they are absent from the room or they are away. To be honest, the regulators in Kenya, both from the Ministry of Health side and the other, have done so poorly. So when Rukwaro says, and it's been fair, that he has 4 types of clients and NHIF is at the bottom, right? That's something that a Minister for Health should actually take very, very seriously. Because the last time I checked the data, Kenya's health expenditure is almost 50-50 with health, with private insurers, and the other amount of money comes from the public sector itself. So if one arm that is that big, mandatory, we pay through taxes and we pay through NHIF is doing that poorly, then it's telling us that the entire system will crumble on account of public sector performance. So yes, I think there's something to tell to private sector, but the public sector performance has to improve immensely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, our panelists. Show of hands, who got something important from this? Yeah?
It's a clarification that is not right.
And
as an activist, I cannot go without...
You cannot let it go.
Some things have got to be put into perspective.
Will it take more than a minute?
No, just 1.5.
No?
I just want to clarify. The NHIF has started being reformed. I'm an activist. When you hear why I sit where I was advantaged to be put there, where there's been a trance between the private sector and the public, is because the private has seen the danger of losing the business, the small business that they've been having. Just to clarify so that you understand, in 2020, NHIF collected 53 billion, 70% of which went to private sector, who insure less than, what percentage did you say?
2.3.
Hello, are we getting where we are coming from? So I think the issue of the equitable, like what Kwame has said, why is Kenya the largest exporters of health to India when we have the private hospitals? And why has India decided, let us come here and build hospitals, they are now your competitors, because they're saying, if we charged half of what those guys charge, they would still make profits. I mean, that is something that we actually need to look at as we're moving. Thank you.
What I'm getting from this is that we cannot exhaust this topic tonight. So, show of hands, who would come in for a second round? It's everyone, thank you. Yeah. Our panelists have decided they'll stay a little bit so that we continue this conversation. There are still some snacks and some bitings there, so we'll get to do more. But to Mr. Kwame, Mr. Kuri, Mr. Ashoksha, Mr. Rukwaro, and my friend, Dr. Soro. I cannot thank you enough for making the time and for being honest, because now we more or less are starting to see where the problems are, and then the next question is how do we all fix it? The first thing that came out very strongly is that the regulator at whatever level has failed both you and both us, the consumer, right? So that is something we have to look at. I'll take clips of this and I'll share so that it gets to the regulator and to some of the people that, the powers that be, because that's how we get the word out there. But for now, let's give our panelists a very big hand. And to Transact for making this evening possible. We are very thankful and we look forward to even more partnerships with Attribute in the space. And to you, the attendees and Business Forum members, I'm really grateful that you made the time and you've stayed this long. We have actually crossed the time by 15 minutes. I'm glad that you stayed. And so until the next time, my name is Irene Gadiaka. Make sure you're on my mailing list, for Nairobi Business Forum. If you're not there, make sure that before you leave, I have your name and email address. Stick around, network some more. Make sure that you get the answers that you want from the panelists. Thank you and have a good night and safe drive home. Yeah? Thank you.